The Monday after that, I was checking out a customer who was an employee of the dispensary, from a different location, and she was training at her store, and she had finished her training, and she wanted to buy some product. And as I was checking her out, she started going nonverbal on me. And I would ask her a question, and she wasn't responding to me, but like she was responding with her eyes. And so I was like, "Did I say something that upset you?" And then she started spinning around in a circle. At which point I kind of figured out what was happening, and I rushed over, and she had a grand mal seizure. Huge healing through the divine. It's time to talk about our divine connections and interventions. We talk Source, Lilith, Hecate, deity work, Jesus Christ, and the trippy ways where they came into our lives. It's time to talk rituals and plant medicine, getting reparented on the etheric, and respecting those who want to work with you. Interdimensional friendships are real. In part 1, I spill the beans on my relationship with Lilith and where it all began. Hello, cheers, meow meow.
Hello, cheers, meow meow. Can you believe it's still only January of 2025? I feel like we've been
I
around in 2025 for like 3 months already.
I keep forgetting it's 2025 because it feels like the last hurrah of 2024 part 5. But like but like I can't believe it's still January, but I'm also so grateful that we only have 2 days left of it. And then
Yes.
January's over.
Yes. And I feel somewhat compelled to like actually mark when we're recording these things because I think that like down the road it's going to be really like we're part of history now, like
Yeah.
what we are talking about is directly being influenced by the situation we find ourselves in. Yay.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like, I mean, we've done an okay job in the past about kind of like talking a little bit about what, like, generalizing when it is. Like I
Mm.
know episode 2 that we're releasing for when season 2 comes out, episode 2 was recorded in like December.
Oh,
So
that'll be fun to go back and
yeah,
listen to. Yeah. And then of
yeah,
course
yeah.
today's topic is infinite. There are no timelines or constrictions on what we want to talk about today. Jenny, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about divinity, specifically our connections to divinity. And obviously the easy jumping point is what what is divinity, And I don't know, Trey, what is divinity?
I put some thought into it because when you grow up in a neither of my parents were religious, but they kept sending us to church on Sundays. Honestly, I think it was like to get us out of the house and get rid of us. So I ended up in lots of different kinds of churches, and I just never connected to anything, and it all felt false. So it's taken me a
Mm,
long time to figure out. Also, I mean, I'm just going to come right out and say it. Like, I kind of hated God for a very long time. But I think what I was really hating was religion and
yeah.
what they were selling me and how it wasn't directly applying to my particular. I was a good person. I was doing good things. And yet, the agony, all the horror, which is part of why I got deeper into the study of spirituality is I wanted to understand some of that. So divinity ended up for me, it's not ghosts, it's not aliens, it's not the collective, and it's definitely not like all the floating negative stuff that like swarms a really dense world and we're all in agreement like this is a really dense vibrational existence. But I would definitely connect angels to divinity. And for me, it's me. I'm God. You're God. We're all God. We're all fractals of the source of the creator. And some people do call it God. When I'm lazy, I call it God, but mostly in my head, I call it source. And man, I tell you,
Mm,
like once you have like a taste, like once you really, really, really connect to divinity, um, you can't be the same afterwards. You will chase that for
No.
the rest of your life, which is how I think churches keep their congregants, because it's either habit or hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know. How about you?
I,
What do you think?
I agree with that. I feel like for me, divinity is summed up pretty easily, but it's obviously a lot more complex of an idea. But it's just a connection that transcends the both the meat suit world, but also the world at large as it is. You know, connections that transcend who we are, connections that transcend, you know, what we're currently doing in this lifetime. Um, you know, and I think that's why it's important that, like you said, divinity comes from like higher powers, but also comes from connections like you and I have, and connections between friends and lovers and family,
Yeah.
because those connections still transcend, you know, and being able to tap into that. But I think today in particular, we are talking about a specific kind of divinity that goes beyond, you know, the earthly connections, you know, divinity
Yeah.
that is a connection between yourself and a quote unquote higher power. Um, Not necessarily specifically God or this oneness idea of God, because we also don't see God as one person, or at least I don't. But like, yeah, just higher power connections and you know and stuff like that. So super exciting.
Yeah, I love it. And it's really odd that like the further I get into it, the more comfortable I am having. I used to like not be able to be around. I called them God people. Like, oh
Mm,
great, there here comes the Bible thumper. I was definitely somebody who looked down on folks who had made those connections. And now I find that those are some of my favorite conversations to be in. So regardless of what religion they come from, it's I'm interested in hearing about the conversation that they're having with their God, and it's continuous. It's an ongoing thing. And then if they lose that thread, if they get disconnected, they're like, no, 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 I got to get back to that. Like that connection is how I know that like I'm on my path, and I'm doing what I'm meant to do, and how best it's going to flow. And I know you've talked
yeah.
about that as well.
Well, and I thought a lot about that recently, about how people who are connected like through Catholicism, Christianity, or Judaism, or like it's still all deity work, you know?
Yeah.
It's absolutely still deity work. Similar to what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm of the vein where I, within the past month, but also the past few days, but also much longer than that, the past year and a half or so, have been getting into my own divine connection. And it really wasn't until last night, actually, which is so funny that we're doing this the night
It happens all the
after.
time, folks. We record exactly when
Yeah,
we're supposed to, when something kind of exciting
exactly
happens.
when we're meant to.
Somehow we're on the mic the next day. So what
Very
happened
mindful,
yesterday?
very demure. So last night was the new moon. So you know that today is January 30th, so that makes it the 29th. Um, and it was a very normal day for me. It was a very normal night, but I hit a moment where I don't know exactly how it came about. Um, I think. Oh no, I do know how it came about. I was editing our podcast, but and I was listening to an interview that we did with, and I think this episode's probably going to come out after. It is going to come out afterwards, but it was specifically when Jen said, you know, I was talking to her about deity work and whatnot, and about my insecurities around it, and how I don't feel like I have the right to be connected to such higher powers. And she was like, well, it's not just about you, like it's about them too, and you know you have to respect their autonomy and respect that they want to work with you. Um and it was just kind of re-listening to that was just kind of like this beautiful connection point. um and I had just recently gotten something physical and tangible that represents this deity in my house. And it happened
Oh.
really interestingly, and really like wildly. And I feel like I actually let this deity into my home by doing that, like physically let them into my house. Um, and it just changed everything. It absolutely did. Um,
How
so I don't know. I guess
exciting.
yeah, we're 10 minutes in, so I'll bridge it.
Do it.
So
Do
I'm
it.
specifically talking about Lilith. I would say at this point I'm connected to two deities with potentially a third on the way, but we'll see about that. I hate how I said that. But the first one was Hecate, and Hecate was, she was the guide. She's always the guide. That's kind of how she works. Is she just guides you to where you're meant to be. She carries her torches and she guides you down the path you're meant to be down. She doesn't need much in return from it, and it certainly wasn't this intense, emotional, overarching, like it wasn't this divine power connection. It was more just like this, oh, opening doors for me connection. Really
Mhm.
grateful for that, and I'm always going to offer to her for that.
Mhm.
But Lilith is, go ahead.
I was just going to say to our listeners, we have talked about Hecate and Jenny's relationship with Hecate in season one. So, like, keyword that on our website if you are
Yeah.
interested, because it's a really great origin story.
Yeah, well, and that origin story was really gentle and really light, and happened over a couple weeks, and then settling into it happened over a little longer than that, and it was very gentle. Whereas Lilith and I, it was not a gentle origin story. Like, it was very rough. It was very sudden. It was very intense, and it took me a long time to be okay with that, and to understand what it is. And it was specifically a piece that I read last night on social media, believe it or not, that was talking about how, and it was because I did research, but it was talking about how if you are afraid to work with Lilith, that fear is rooted in the misogynistic propaganda surrounding her, and that, and it clicked for me, and I'm like, oh my god, so okay, and I really need to let that go. Um, but yeah, so I'm trying to think of how to wrap this all up. I don't know, what questions do you have, and then because
Um,
there's so many things to talk about, so
Millions.
much to
I
bring
know,
up.
I know, I know. I think
I
first
know.
we have to talk about, like, well, who is Lilith? Both on
Yeah.
the misogynistic view, but then like the reality of it.
Yeah. So I'm going to see if I can flip to the page really quickly.
Awesome.
Um, I have this book that I got. It's called The Book of Lilith. It's from Barbara Black Coltive. And what she did is she comprised every single text that has ever existed regarding to Lilith, but then has also put in her understanding of Lilith surrounding it, because 90% of the texts that revolve around Lilith are misogynistic,
Yep.
and contain this misogynistic idea of Lilith. But the reality is it's a lot more than that, and how to exist in both realms and understand that. But basically, Lilith has existed in multiple cultures and in multiple religions. The most approachable version is she was made at the same time as Adam, and it was Adam and Lilith. Um, but Lilith would not give her body to Adam like was required, and chose her own autonomy over that, and so she was demonized, and then after that there was Eve, who was made supposedly in the image of man, and so the creation version of a woman who is subservient to man, and whether you believe that Eve is subservient or not is entirely up to you, and not necessarily, you know I'm getting trailed off, but like, Lilith, she represents in a lot of ways the power for women to take control, the power for women to stand up to the norm of society and stand up to the misogyny of society and say, no, this is how it is, this is how I am. And because of that, she's demonized, and she they put horns on her all the time, and she doesn't have horns. So yeah, yeah, I think that's I
Not the
think
bride
that's
of
the best way I
Satan,
can
as it
describe.
turns out. that's
No.
that's not. And I remember somebody uh, talking about the apple from the tree of life or the tree of knowledge or whatever it is, that they recast it as that the like for a woman to connect to knowledge was the worst possible thing, and that if you're
Hmm.
female, like you need to not be educated, because that's the path to Satan. And yeah, what a crack up, huh?
Well, and a lot of that talks about like I've just started delving into this book, but a lot of it talks about like how Lilith represents like the unholy desires of man and all the things that the shame that women have brought upon men supposedly, you know,
Oh,
and yeah, oh yeah, oh
wow.
yeah, it's crazy. Um and it's really wonderful to like take that and then instead turn it into no, it represents all these amazing things that make us who we are, you know, and these animalistic desires about us, because it's really this connection to the id. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm a lot's coming at me at once, and I'm starting to get very like, as soon as I
Lightheaded.
started talking about this, not lightheaded, but just like, what's going on? Where am I? kind of moment, you know? I don't really know how to describe it. Like, I had a very clear plan of attack, and now that I'm going into it, it's just suddenly becoming like, whoa, 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 this is
Sometimes
crazy.
channeling is too much, and then you have to, like, okay, like, give me one line to follow. I can't process all the things you're giving me.
Yeah,
um, I
definitely.
read
And
a
I always
book
hate when I
called
take control.
oh I read a book called Mary Magdalene Revealed, which is another tremendous game changer. So the King James Bible in 1611, when this version came out, this was the one that a bunch of white guys, rich white Europeans, all got together and took the original doctrines that were written, um, and misogynize them and turn them about land
Mm-hmm.
ownership and people ownership and vengefulness, and all of the stuff that we are gifted with these days. But when you go back into like what they did to Mary Magdalene is, she was a prostitute, and Jesus tolerated her, but we don't have to, because women are evil. And then when you go back and you find out what the true story is, because there's a lot of people who have gone into these original texts, and you realize, no, she was the first among equals of Jesus' disciples. She was actually the lieutenant, well, not to use a military phrase, but she was the right hand person. And that Jesus and they were in love, and they were possibly married, and they possibly had kids. And when because he knew he was going to be beaten feet at some point, um, she was the one who was charged with carrying forward his doctrine. And they erased her, and then they reduced her to what they needed a woman to be in order for the men to, get to feel important and empowered. Highly recommended, because I do feel there's a lot of mirroring on what happened to
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene, and certainly what happened to Lilith. Lilith got it so much worse, like so much worse.
You know, and I feel like she got it really, really bad, but then also there's this really intense power that came from that. This power of, you know, people putting hatred towards me is still people putting energy towards me, you know, and this power of being able to withstand all of that and still make something of yourself. And so that those of us who get connected with Lilith, it's not just this gentle, you know, Lilith isn't necessarily a quiet deity. You know, she's not like a vengeful one. She's not angry, she's not jealous, she's not mean,
And
but
that's how
she's
she's
intense.
usually cast.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
wrath of Lilith is going to destroy,
She's
bad
never gonna
men.
attack you. Yeah, she's never gonna attack you. I can't do a spell to like sick Lilith on somebody. Like that's not how this works. But it's very much like an understanding that it's a hard world out there, and it's a hard stuff that she's been put through, and you have been put through hard things yourself if you're seeking her out, more than likely, you
Mm.
know, and she's going to ask you to come to terms with that and to look those hard things in the eye, because if you're not willing to look those in the eye, you're not willing to look your own demons in the eye, or the demonized version of yourself in the eye, and say, yeah, this is
Mm.
me, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Nicely
And
said.
thank you. Yeah, do you want to go into the origin story? I feel like this is becoming very Lilith centered, and I don't want to take away from what you were
No,
going to
no, I
talk
don't. I
about.
don't have any problems talking about Lilith in your
Okay.
relationship. I actually would love to keep it on because you had said that yesterday. You know, you had this powerful moment where
Yes.
after months of knowing that she was on the peripheral. So, guys, anytime Jenny in past episodes have talked about, I'm not allowed to talk about this deity yet. I'm not allowed to talk to this deity yet. You know, this is the deity that she was entering in sort of an early stages of a relationship. And now you feel
Mm,
confident that, like, okay, this is it. This is going to be my jam. Is that what happened?
yeah. Yes, and I don't think I can talk about the facts behind her as much, and I think that's why I started to get a little foggy, is because I haven't done all my research yet. But I can talk about my relationship with her. And I think, looking at the start of it, I had been drawn to Lilith very much the same way I had been drawn to Hecate, where it's going to sound dumb, but like this is also something you figure out when you start to get into rocks is it's the aesthetic stuff about it. Like I really liked the name Lilith, and anytime Lilith was brought up in things, I was like, "Oh, cool,
Ooh,
like I need to know
good book.
more." There's a video game where there's a Lilith version and she's my favorite character, and just stuff like that. And so when I started getting into deity work, my spirits proposed to me that Lilith might be one of them. And I said out loud, after I think this was right around the time it started getting real with me and Hecate, I said out loud, I was like, if I'm meant to get connected with Lilith, I need to be shown. Okay. This was on a Thursday. um, Saturday after that, it's at my work, and I worked at a dispensary at the time, and we had mouse traps that were glue traps. And glue traps are absolutely one of the most inhumane versions of mouse traps. And for those, if you want to know more about how they work, you should Google it. But like, essentially, the mouse just gets stuck there and has to die slowly. And I heard a squeaking from one of them, and it was a baby mouse caught in the glue trap, and it was not going to get out of there in any safe way. And it was this moment of, oh my gosh, I am somebody who is coming upon something that is awful and inhumane, and I have a choice now. I have a choice to set it down and walk away or do something about it. um, and as awful as killing something is, I couldn't just let it die slowly. That seemed like the crappier option.
Yeah.
So I had to mercy kill the
And there's no
mouse.
way to like separate a mouse from a glue trap. So those really are the only two choices.
No, there's no way. Like its leg was broken. It was in bad shape. And so I had to mercy kill the mouse. And then the Monday after that, I was checking out a customer who was an employee of the dispensary, from a different location. And she was training at her store, and she had finished her training, and she wanted to buy some product. And as I was checking her out, she started going nonverbal on me. And I would ask her a question, and she wasn't responding to me, but like she was responding with her eyes. And so I was like, did I say something that upset you? And then she started spinning around in a circle. At which point I kind of figured out what was happening, and I rushed over, and she had a grand mal seizure on me. And it was
Oh,
the first time I'd ever had somebody seize on me. Her leg broke from it, which I'm drawing
oh
parallels between
wow.
her and the mouse now. Yeah, like full on really bad seizure. I had to get people to call 911 and everything. Had paramedics look at the footage. I connected with her later, and she said it was the first seizure she'd ever had in her life, and that she literally went from being at the dispensary and checking out to waking up in the hospital. Like
Terrifying.
she did, yeah, absolutely terrifying. And I was the first point of contact for that. So I said out loud to let me know if I'm supposed to get connected with this deity. And in the span of 3 days, I had two really, really intense moments happen to me that as a healer, I have to get used to, and I have to be able to navigate situations like this as a healer, if I am calling myself a healer, happened just like that. And it was just this moment of like, oh my gosh, like this isn't like connecting with Hecate, where I have these moments of like divine intervention and like have these moments of thinking thoughts and then seeing them on a piece of paper, or have these moments of these doors opening. No, this is different.
Yeah,
This
it's
is like
rough.
you ask for something, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Um,
Can
and I
I
was
ask,
like,
like, what
wow,
was your, like, what
go
did you
ahead.
do for this young person who went into the seizure? I mean, did you go
I
try to
caught
monitor
her.
her? You caught her.
Yeah, I caught her. I caught
Oh my
her.
god.
And then I held her. I had somebody help stabilize her legs. And then I just held her and made sure her head didn't hit anything. Told somebody to go call 911. And just be there with her, because that's really all you can do is just write it out and make
Yeah.
sure that things are safe. Once I was on the phone with paramedics, they told me to turn her on her side, just in case she did start spitting anything up.
Mhm.
And then we waited for paramedics to come, and that was it. And then afterwards, because she wanted to know what happened, and my company wouldn't release the footage to her, so
Yeah.
I connected with her and told her specifically what happened and how it all went down. So I also acted as the like the rap the reflection piece for her, and the understanding
Right.
piece, because to just black out and wake up is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you did that because a lot of people wouldn't have had, I'm going to say like the courage to go against company policy and to be like, this might happen to you again and this is what it's going to be like. And maybe you can tell the people that you are around, that if you start going nonverbal, then this is probably a cue. I mean, that's huge. Like what you
Hmm.
did was really great.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't have the confidence surrounding it, but I was still like I did what I could. So yeah,
Interesting.
that was crazy, and that's kind of how it started. Um, and it was very tentative at first. I don't think I did my first ritual with Lilith until probably like a couple months after that. But when I've asked Lilith for things and I've gotten them, it, I want to be clear, it's been a hard journey since I've connected with Lilith, but I don't think that's because of Lilith. I think it's because I've always had hard things to come to terms with, and I
Mm.
finally had a deity who was willing to do that with me, and to help me through that.
Yeah.
Because the trauma that I've had to deal with is a lot, and it's not going to be an easy path digging that up and working through it,
Right.
and
I had a client that I could like energetic support, so angelic support and ancestral support and stuff, and he he's been going through a pretty rough time, and he got really angry. He's like, "Really, this is me with support?" And I said, okay, but you don't know how much worse it could have been if they weren't there, like modulating things. Like, we don't know. Just say thank you, and keep looking for moments that you feel like they are stepping in so that you can at least give them gratitude. We often have no idea how much they are. Guiding the process. And when you can partner
yeah.
with it, it really changes everything.
Yeah, definitely. And, I'm willing to admit that I think I had a lot of that negative association with Lilith, where it's like, oh my gosh, these bad things are happening to me. Am I cursed? Like, did I make the wrong choice? Am I actually connecting with a deity who doesn't want to be connected with me and is making it very clear to me, and I'm just being an idiot? Um, and I think that that's where my trepidation about talking with her came from, because I think the reality is I was always allowed to talk about Lilith on this podcast, but I never felt comfortable doing so
Okay.
because I hadn't gotten to the point where I fully understood what that connection was, and trusted that connection for what it was. And it took talking to Jen, and it took uh, to catch up on what happened. We Sam, my roommate and best friend, they wanted to hang out. And they're like, I really want to go to Urban Arts. And I was like, okay, we can
Which
go to
is
Urban Arts.
a
It's a,
metaphysical store where you live. So like
yep.
crystals and sage and
Yeah.
quartz and yeah.
Yeah. And it's good stuff. And I really like the vibes there. And previously, I had always wanted to get a statue for Lilith on my altar. And I found one at another metaphysical shop that mirrored this puzzle that I had associated with Lilith. And I was like, it was $120. And I was like, okay, I think this is the one. So I end up at Urban Arts, and Urban Arts has a statue of Lilith at the store, to the point that it's labeled as Lilith. It has Lilith's name carved into the statue at the bottom. Um, and it was about $50 cheaper than the other statue.
Yeah.
Um, and I also happened to make it to where I got into the money that I needed to get for that statue in that moment. Like money came through right as I entered that store, for
Oh,
me to
no
buy that
way. Like
statue.
for real?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of manipulated it that way where I was like, hey, this person who I trust in my life, would I be able to borrow money off of you and pay you back when I get paid on Friday? And she was like, yeah. Um, and so it worked out that way. But I was like, if I'm meant to get the statue, like, let me know and I'll do it. And I was pretty uncertain about it at first. But I think trusting Lilith has told me that I need to trust moments where I'm most uncertain and trust myself to make the right choice. And so I was about to get the statue, and then I left the store without the statue, and I tripped over a rug on the way out. It was like a no, like don't leave the store without the statue. And then I was sitting in the car with Sam, and I was like, I think I made a mistake. And so I flipped a coin, and I was like, if I'm meant to get the statue, it's heads. If I'm not, it's tails. And I flipped the coin, and it was heads, and so I got the statue, and put it in my room. And it brought this presence to my room that really just changed everything, because it was like I finally had this devoted place for Lilith. Um, and the other night, last night, when I was reading up on Lilith and I was reading about how it's important to really do your research for her and to respect her with your research, and I
Yeah.
started doing research on her and really looking into her and reading more, I just felt this moment where I was just filled with so much love, and I just had this really warm presence inside of me, and I was really joyous and comfortable and at ease, and I felt safe and I felt seen. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is a relationship. Like, this is a connection. This is not just me taking something from a deity. Like, this is a connection that needs to be fostered. And as soon as I started actually accepting that and started fostering it, she just really really came through. And it was after listening to Jen say, respect her autonomy, that she wants to work with you, and then doing the research on her, reading that piece about how my fear around her is just misogyny, and just understanding and letting go of that fear, letting go of the fear of talking about her on the podcast. Like, it was just so divine and just so special. And I feel like my relationship with her leveled up a little bit, where it's like I feel a lot more understanding behind her. I understand that the new moons are hers, that it's the dark moon, if you will, is her biggest connection point. So anytime there's a new moon, I'll be doing a ritual for her. But like, yeah, all this huge character arc of, can I trust Lilith, should I have her in my life, it was just kind of ended on of like, of course, you dummy, like,
Of
yes, this whole
course.
time.
But you had to go through, and you were going through some stuff, man. That cannot be
Yeah.
underestimated. That we can't see clearly. I mean, this is part of what the human struggle is the muddier our worlds get, the dimmer that connection is, and that clarity and our ability to hear. I mean, you were flipping a coin in the car, and I've been known to use my pendulum. In fact, almost all
Yeah.
the metaphysical people I know keep a yes no thing, handy, because they can't always just plug right in and to know what the thing is. But I love that you respected her enough to be like, I gotta take this seriously. Like, if I'm gonna get a statue, like, that means something. It's a big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah, and I had to be sure. And it was at a time where I had recently come upon a third deity calling out to me. And
Mhm.
I was just like overwhelmed. And I was like, I can't, how am I already getting connected with a third, maybe? I don't even know if I've trusted my relationship with Lilith enough. And so getting the statue and putting it at her spot in my altar. Oh my gosh, under the candlelight, especially the candle I have for her, it goes right under the statue, and it just looks so beautiful under the candle. It's just so good. It was a really big moment for us. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Does she consider, how do I put this? I don't know if I ever really thought of Lilith as a deity. I think that once I learned the phrase ascended master, that's kind of where I was putting her. But like Hecate, like, that's a deity. Shiva,
Yeah.
Kali, like, those are deities. Like, is Lilith a deity?
I've seen her both referred to. I've seen her referred to as an angel, a demon, and a goddess. So it's like
All of the above,
it's
baby. There's a song from the 90s that I think applies here.
right, exactly, and like I don't know, I feel her presence as a goddess in my life,
Okay.
and I can't, and maybe I should better ask her how she views herself more. But the influence that she's had on my life, the influence that she's had on myself, the connection that I've had with her, it feels very divine at times, but it's also very personal. It's not like I could ask Hecate a question and get a response in the moment, but I absolutely have had a lot of moments like that with Lilith,
Mhm.
and channeled her pretty hard. So yeah, I personally feel like that's our connection, but I'm open to the fact that I could be wrong about that, and open to doing more research. And halfway through this
Just
book,
getting
it's
to
like, don't
know
refer.
her.
Yeah, exactly.
How
So who
exciting.
knows?
Yeah, right
Yeah.
on.
Thanks for listening to part one. Be sure to tune into part two later this week.